My mother abandoned dying in the ER for a spa day. Betrayal. I'm busy. If she dies, call me. 20 days later, I woke up to a new legal guardian. You know that feeling when your entire world shatters in an instant, and the people who are supposed to protect you just look away? I'm talking about being 18, broken on a gurney, fighting for my life, and hearing my own mother dismiss me with a chilling, "If she doesn't pull through, just let me know later. We're in the middle of a treatment." That was my reality. But what I discovered when I finally woke up, 20 agonizing days later, was far more shocking. The name of my legal guardian had completely changed. And let me tell you, that's where my story truly begins. It all started in a sprawling white mansion on James Island, just outside Charleston, a place that felt more like a stage than a home after my dad vanished from my life. He was teaching me to ride my bike one week, a vibrant, laughing presence. And then, at 8 years old, he was just gone. Leukemia, they said. The only person who showed up week after the funeral was my grandpa David Thompson. He was the former police chief, a man everyone in the county knew, who'd traded his badge for a porch swing and a fishing rod. I'd sit in the front seat of his old Ford truck, listening to stories of chasing bootleggers as he brought me shrimp and grits from his favorite spot on Shem Creek. He wasn't just Grandpa John to me, he was just Grandpa, the only adult who never ever cancelled. My mother, Sarah Hayes, was a ghost for over a year. Then, she met Mark Davies at a downtown charity event. Mark drove a sleek black Range Rover that always smelled of new leather, and he owned half the new high-rises on Kiowa Island. 2 years later, I barely remember the beachside ceremony. 9 months after that, Chloe arrived, blonde and boisterous, and instantly the undisputed center of the universe. Our house transformed, nannies appeared, a nursery materialized, and new rules were drawn up. My bedroom, my space, was relegated to a back corner over the garage so Chloe could have the larger room with the balcony. My soccer medals, symbols of my passion, were unceremoniously dumped into dusty crates. My mother stopped calling me by name, instead referring to me as my older daughter, as if I were just an inconvenient prop in their perfect family portrait. By 14, I was essentially invisible. Mark only ever noticed me if I was physically in his way. Still, he paid for everything. Chloe got new designer outfits every season. I got hand-me-down uniforms from a private school I didn't even attend. The only place I still felt genuinely wanted was Grandpa's modest brick home in West Ashley, a peaceful 30-minute drive across the Ravenel Bridge. His freezer was always stocked with popsicles. My old bike waited patiently in his garage, and he never once asked why I spent every spare weekend there. That Easter, when I was 18, was supposed to be different. Grandpa David hosted his annual barbecue, deviled eggs, sweet tea in mason jars, a low country boil, and 3 long tables overflowing with food under the ancient live oaks. Cousins I hadn't seen in years flew in. Children laughed and chased each other, and the air hummed with music and the scent of charcoal. Grandpa said the pale yellow sundress he'd bought me last month matched my eyes, so I wore it. For a few fleeting hours, it was like the good old days, a brief illusion that maybe I still belonged somewhere. Then, by the dessert table, I heard my mother on the phone. She was telling someone she and Chloe had scheduled a mother-daughter spy day for the next morning. She giggled, messages, facials, the full thing. And then Mark, and Chloe were flying to the Bahamas for spring break. My name was mentioned, a casual afterthought, and I felt a plate of banana pudding turn ice, cold in my sweating palms. I found Grandpa and, with a forced smile, told him I had a headache and needed to leave early. He tried to argue, his brow furrowed with concern, but I just needed out. He just nodded, then tossed me the keys to the used 2002 Jeep Wrangler he'd helped me buy with my lifeguard earnings. "Drive careful, baby girl," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Text me when you get there." By the time I hit I-45 westbound, the sky was already bleeding into darkness. And as they do in the low country, a spring storm rolled in fast, turning the evening green with sheets of rain. My windshield wipers fought a losing battle. Traffic slowed to a crawl. I cranked up the radio, trying to stay awake. An old country tune Grandpa David loved filling the cabin. Headlights blurred into red and white streaks. I didn't see the tractor-trailer until it was too late. Traveling at least 60 miles, the driver jackknifed across 3 lanes, hydroplaned, and then with a horrifying shriek of metal and bursting glass, slammed into the driver's side of my Jeep. The world spun twice, the ceiling caved in, and then the universe came to an abrupt, silent halt, upside down against the median. I remember the sudden quiet after the crash, the coppery taste of blood, the seatbelt biting into my shoulder, and then nothing. I heard sirens, distant at first, then screaming closer. The Meusi emergency room was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Doctors barked codes. Monitors shrieked for O negative. Trauma Bay 1, someone yelled. In seconds, my clothes were cut away. Tubes snaked down my throat. Needles pierced both arms. My pelvis was shattered, spleen ruptured, internal bleeding in my skull. A surgeon in bloodstained scrubs leaned over me, his voice urgent. She has less than an hour before this becomes irreversible. We need parental consent to get her into the OR. Now. A compassionate nurse grabbed my phone, navigated to Mom, and hit FaceTime. On the third ring, the call connected. I could hear the soft hum of massage chairs and the gentle plink of spa music. My mother's face materialized on the screen, cucumber slices still covering her eyes, a sheet mask clinging to her skin. Next to her, Chloe was spread out on another table, earbuds in, scrolling TikTok. Mrs. Hayes, the nurse began, tilting the camera slightly so my mother could see the ventilator tube, the blood, my broken face. This is Nurse Alvarez from USC Trauma. Your daughter has been in a severe accident. She has life-threatening injuries and requires immediate surgery. We need verbal consent now or she may not survive the next hour. Sarah squinted at the phone, then slowly pulled off a cucumber slice. Chloe leaned over, pulled out an earpiece to glance at the screen. The physician interjected, his voice firm. Sarah sighed, as if someone had just asked her to move her car. Mom, we're looking at multiple fractures, internal bleeding, possible brain swelling. We have to open her up immediately. Her reply was a flat, emotionless drone. If she doesn't make it, just give me a call when it's over. Chloe, at 14, actually let out a sharp laugh, then quickly stopped. Her thumbs flew across the screen, taking a snapshot of my bruised face on the gurney. I would later learn the caption she sent to her group chat was, "Welcome change of pace." The phone trembled in the nurse's hand. She tried again. A doctor behind her mumbled, "Jesus Christ." Another whispered, "Get that recorded." "Mom, this is a legal requirement for a minor." Sarah cut in, her voice now sharp. "I heard you. Call my father, David Thompson. He'll handle it. We paid for a full day here." And then she disconnected the call. The trauma team stared at the blank screen, stunned. One of the residents looked like he was about to hurl the phone across the room. They scrolled to the next emergency contact, Grandpa David Thompson. When the hospital reached him, he was already driving. He'd been cleaning shrimp on his patio, preparing for tomorrow's dinner. Still wearing rubber boots and an apron smeared with fish blood, he dropped everything. He floored it across the Ashley River Bridge, the rain hammering the windshield, lightning illuminating the sky. The 30-minute drive took him 20. Soaked to the bone, his 32-year-old badge still habitually clipped to his belt, he burst through the emergency room doors. The charge nurse, recognizing the former chief with a quick glance, waved him through. His hand trembled so violently that the pen scratched the paper as he signed every consent document thrust in front of him without reading a single line. They allowed him into the bay just long enough to see me, a tangle of tubes and a face so swollen it was unrecognizable. He leaned close to my ear, whispering the same words he used to say when I had nightmares as a child. "I've got you, baby girl. Grandpa's right here." Then, they rushed me to the operating room. Outside the OR, he dragged a metal chair up to the glass wall and sat down. For the next 10 hours, he didn't move. Not when nurses offered coffee. Not when the waiting room emptied. Not even when the storm outside cut power for 14 minutes and the backup generator roared to life. Just before dawn, he followed my bed as they wheeled me to the intensive care unit, still clutching the same icy hand that had gone slack hours before. The next 20 days were the longest of Grandpa David's life. The ICU smelled of fear and antiseptic. The rhythmic hiss and beep of machines were a constant reminder of how thin the line was. Grandpa refused to leave the vinyl recliner by my bed. The first night, nurses tried to send him home. He simply handed them the old badge, still in his wallet, and declared, "I'm not going anywhere." No one argued. He slept with his boots on, head tilted back, mouth agape, for 30 minutes at a time. When he woke, he spoke to me quietly, continuously, just loud enough to cut through the din of the monitors. He told me about the night I was born, how he held me first because my mother was too tired. He recounted how we'd caught a 6-foot shark off Folly Beach Pier when I was 8, and how I screamed until he let me reel it in myself. He read aloud from a battered edition of To Kill a Mockingbird. He kept in his truck, doing all the voices. Some nights he would just hum the ancient hymn his own mother used to sing, the one that always put me to sleep on his couch. Physicians came and went. "Her brain swelling has gone down," the neurologist announced one morning. The pelvis might never mend properly, the orthopedic surgeon cautioned another afternoon. Grandpa listened, nodded, asked pointed questions that made the residents sweat. then returned to holding my hand as if nothing had changed. Eventually, on day 18, the numbers started to move in the right direction. My blood pressure stabilized. The ventilator settings dropped. A nurse caught Grandpa David grinning for the first time in 3 weeks. That same day, as he leaned in to whisper that the redfish were running and we'd go fishing as soon as I woke up, a tall man in a navy suit appeared at the glass door. Officer Jenkins. 28 years ago, he'd worked cases with Grandpa. They still played poker once a month. Grandpa glanced at Officer Jenkins's folder and nodded slowly, no words necessary. Leaving the hospital, Officer Jenkins hopped into his silver Lexus and drove directly to James Island. He'd memorized the address. In the entryway, amidst high-end luggage, stood Sarah and Chloe. 2 identical pink suitcases, tags already on, waited by the door for a 7-night Royal Caribbean cruise, departing Charleston Harbor early the next day. Mark was upstairs on a work call. Chloe was recording herself spinning in a brand new sundress for Instagram. Sarah was double, checking passports. The doorbell rang. Officer Jenkins introduced himself, handed Sarah a large envelope, and watched as she tore it open. Inside were 2 sets of papers, a civil claim brought by the hospital for extraordinary life, saving costs, plus pain and suffering, and an emergency petition to revoke parental rights for medical neglect of a minor. The petition also named Chloe, 14 at the time, for actively participating in the neglect. Sarah's spray-tanned face turned white. Mid-spin, Chloe stopped recording. "You have 80 hours to respond," Officer Jenkins stated, his voice calm. Sarah began to rant about attorneys, mistakes, and how dare anyone question her parenting. After that, the judge has already agreed to an emergency hearing. Chloe broke down in tears, yelling that the texts meant nothing. Officer Jenkins simply turned and walked back to his vehicle. Sarah slid down the wall of the house, clutching the papers, mascara streaming down her face in black rivulets. Chloe wouldn't stop screaming that her spring break was ruined. Mark came downstairs, glanced at the papers, and turned pale. Back at the hospital, Grandpa David never mentioned the visit. Humming the same old hymn, he continued to grasp my hand, waiting for my eyes to open. 3 days later, I opened my eyes for the first time. Everything hurt. My mouth tasted of plastic and metal. The machine still beeped, but now more softly. The first face I saw was Grandpa David's, his red-rimmed, unshaven eyes crinkling into a smile. His cheeks were so big I thought they might split. "Hey, baby girl," he croaked, his voice a gravelly murmur. "Welcome back." I tried to speak. Only a rasp emerged. He hit the call button, then raised the whiteboard at the foot of the bed for me to read. In large, bold black characters, it said and Avidecheyapson. I stared until the words blurred. Tears rolled down the sides of my face, into my ears. With a thumb that still carried the faint scent of shrimp and salt air, he wiped them away. Over the next few hours, while physicians shined lights in my eyes and nurses checked vital signs, he told me everything. My mother's exact words on the FaceTime call. Closed screenshot. The papers served while I lay unconscious. He didn't sugarcoat a single detail. I sobbed again, harder this time, not from pain, but from such profound relief it felt like drowning in reverse. 3 weeks later, they allowed me to return home. Not to James Island, but to Grandpa David's small, grey home on stilts on Folly Beach, 20 minutes south of the city. The moment he carried me over the threshold, the sea air filled my lungs. His fishing tackle room was my new bedroom. He'd painted the walls a light blue and hung the identical wind chimes we'd crafted when I was 9. Beyond the window, I could see the ocean rolling steadily and endlessly. Physical therapy began the next Monday. Grandpa watched me like I was 2 years old again as I relearned to sit up, stand, and finally, shuffle behind a walker. He made shrimp and grits every night because they were soft enough for my wired jaw. We'd sit on the porch swing, his arm around my shoulders, watching the sunset. Neither of us needed to break the silence. One day my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. "Mom," appeared on the screen. I watched it ring 12 times. Grandpa, silent, watched from the doorway. I hit decline, put the phone down, and returned to the porch. She never tried again. That same week, across town, Mark filed for divorce. His company had just landed a huge contract with the Port Authority. He didn't need to be associated with child abandoning headlines. Taking only his clothes and golf clubs, he left the James Island house before the ink was dry. After losing her mind on social media for about 4 days, Chloe went completely silent as college scholarship offers started getting cancelled. Grandpa David didn't mention it until I asked. When I did, he gave me a direct, unwavering response. "They made their choice, Sophia. Now we make ours." On several nights, I woke up screaming from the phantom pain. He'd stumble in, wearing old police academy sweats, sit on the edge of the bed, and hold my hand until the medication took effect. On other evenings, I'd wake to the sound of him praying aloud in the living room, his rough voice pleading with God to grant him enough years to see me fully restored. When the stitches were out and the casts replaced with braces, I was finally able to walk the entire length of the pier without stopping. Grandpa bought a bucket of shrimp and 2 rods. We sat where the water turned deep green. The lines in the water didn't catch much, but we didn't care. The sun burned off the last vestiges of the hospital smell from my skin. One evening, as the wind whipped my hair across my face, I gazed out at the horizon and knew I had stopped waiting for anything. No second opportunities, no explanations, no apologies. I had no desire to give any either. As usual, the ocean simply continued to move. A few months later, the day of the preliminary hearing arrived. The Broad Street courthouse smelled of floor polish and old wood. I entered using crutches, Grandpa David on one side, Officer Jenkins on the other. At the defendant's table sat my mother, Sarah, in a navy suit 2 sizes too big, no makeup, eyes puffy. Beside her, Chloe slouched in a private school blazer, staring at the ground. The judge, a steel gray-haired woman, had no patience. She adjusted her glasses and instructed the bailiff to roll the tape. The large screen flickered to life, displaying the FaceTime conversation. My fractured body. The background spur music. My mom's voice, chillingly clear. "If she doesn't make it, just call me when it's over." Chloe's sharp, undeniable laughter. Then the screen grab of my bloodied face with her cruel caption. The courtroom was utterly silent. I actually heard a juror in the rear gasp. Next, Officer Jenkins placed the phone logs on the bench. Within 5 minutes, Chloe had sent that picture to 8 other group chats. The judge's pen stopped flowing when one message was displayed: "One less person stealing my spring break." She gave my mother a long, painful look. "Mrs. Hayes," she uttered in an icy voice, "in 28 years on this bench, I have never heard a parent speak about their child this way. While that child was fighting for her life, temporary full custody is immediately transferred to David Thompson, effective today. We'll see you back here for the permanent hearing." She struck the gavel with such force it reverberated across the marble. 3 days later, Sarah Hayes was let go from her position at the South Carolina State Credit Union. Anyone handling federal funding has to undergo a background check. Medical neglect of a minor is an automatic disqualifier. Security escorted her out with a cardboard box. That same week, Chloe's full-ride academic scholarship at the College of Charleston was cancelled. The admissions board cited behavior inconsistent with the school's principles. Suddenly, the private high school that had always revered her began to whisper behind her back. Within a month, the James Island home went into foreclosure. The deed already had Mark's name on it. He'd signed everything over to safeguard his assets. Mother and daughter moved into a 2-bedroom apartment off Savannah Highway with a malfunctioning elevator and peeling paint. Chloe lost her car. To pay her rent, Sarah found a night job stocking shelves at a supermarket. In the interim, I began going to actual therapy. Twice a week, a van picked me up for outpatient physical rehabilitation at MUSC. I regained my ability to climb stairs, balance on a Bosu ball, and eventually trust my own legs. Every single time, Grandpa David took me to the car and waited in the lobby, reading the same 3 fishing magazines until I emerged, trembling and sweaty. On Thursdays, I saw Dr. Rivera, a trauma psychotherapist. In her tiny lavender-scented office, we discussed nightmares, anger, and the day I decided I never wanted to hear my mother's voice again. Grandpa waited in the truck, windows down, country station turned low, never grumbling about the heat. On other afternoons, when the agony in my hips became unbearable, I would sit on the back deck and feed bits of bread to the German Shepherd. Grandpa and I would watch the tide go out, sipping sweet tea. He never tried to calm my rage. He simply allowed me to feel it. By the end of the summer, I could use a cane instead of crutches, and then nothing at all. I still had a slight limp, but the doctor predicted it would mostly disappear by the time I was 25. One evening, I walked all the way to the end of Folly Pier and back without stopping. Though the sun hadn't set, Grandpa David met me halfway with a lantern and a blanket. We took off our shoes and relaxed on the sand, allowing the waves to lick our toes. My head was resting on his shoulder. "Thank you for staying," I said. He kissed the top of my head. "Nowhere else I'd rather be, baby girl." 8 months after the crash, the last trial day arrived. I entered the courtroom without a limp, crutches, or cane. My head was held high, though the scar on my forehead remained pink. Grandpa David sat directly behind me in his Sunday suit, the same one he wore to my dad's funeral. Sarah, with her hair tied back tightly, a tissue she never used clutched in her hand, appeared smaller than I remembered. Chloe crossed her arms so tightly her knuckles turned white, gazing straight ahead. Officer Jenkins called me to the stand first. I sat down, swore, and met the judge's gaze. I inhaled. Tell the court how it felt. He prompted, knowing your mother refused to come while you were dying. The chamber waited, hushed. It felt like the last piece of me that still believed I mattered just died on that table. I stated, my voice steady. One sentence told me I was disposable. The same woman who used to read me bedtime stories was the one who said it. I told them about seeing Grandpa David's name on the Guardian line when I woke up, about the one missed call I never answered, almost every night how I fell asleep listening to the water instead of wondering why I wasn't enough. Sarah's attorney attempted to portray her as anxious, overburdened, a victim of her situation. He mentioned her divorce, foreclosure, and loss of employment. I never gave her a glance. When he was done, the judge asked if I had anything further to say. Yes, Your Honor. I responded. I don't want her money. I don't want her apologies. I just want this to be over. I already have a family. The judge didn't take long. 25 minutes later, she returned. Permanent termination of parental rights for Sarah Hayes, effective immediately. Civil judgment in favor of the plaintiff and the hospital $500,000. The James Island property will be sold at auction to satisfy the lion. Mr. David Thompson is granted full legal adoption. This case is closed. The gavel snapped like a gunshot. Reporters yelled questions in the hallway outside. Ignoring everyone, I grabbed Grandpa David's arm, and we ventured out into the October sunshine. 4 weeks later, the large white mansion was padlocked by the bank. What little Sarah and Chloe chose to keep was taken by a moving truck. They packed their items into an ancient car and proceeded north on I-45 to a less expensive place where no one knew them. I never inquired as to where. The adoption documents came in the mail the same month. I wept more than the day I woke from the coma when I signed Sophia Thompson. For the first time, my dad's old service photo sits next to the certificate Grandpa framed over the fireplace. 12 minutes from Folly Beach, I began my final year at an alternative school. No one knew the story unless I told them. The courses were small, and the teachers genuinely cared. I received early decision admission to the College of Charleston, close enough for me to return home every night if I desired, and I made the honor roll each quarter. On graduation day, it was windy and warm. The pale blue gown and cap I wore matched the hue of the walls in my bedroom, which Grandpa David had painted for me. Everyone in the senior class knew by that point who had gotten me through. So, when they called my name, they all stood up and cheered. Grandpa David was waiting in his dress uniform at the bottom of the stairs, his eyes bright, his medals polished. I sprinted over to him, wrapped my arms around his neck, and allowed him to hoist me off the ground as if I was still weightless. That Easter Sunday was 6 years ago. Now that I'm 21, I work as a family trauma counselor at a nonprofit organization in Mount Pleasant, my psychology degree hanging on the wall. Teenagers who think no one will ever choose them sit across from me every day, and I get to tell them they're mistaken, because someone picked me when the ones who were meant to love me the most turned their backs. Last month was Grandpa David's 77th birthday. He still mows the yard by himself, still makes the greatest shrimp and grits in the state, and catches more fish than any charter boat skipper on the island. The house on stilts, with its creaky coffee pot, singing porch swing, and wind chimes, is always half full. My old room is still light blue. Neither of us ever converted his tackle room back to a bedroom, so it remains that way. Most nights, we watch dolphins chasing mullet in the surf while we have dinner on the deck. He refers to me as baby girl. Precisely once per day, usually while passing me a cup of sweet tea, I still refer to him as Grandpa. There's nothing else that seems right. 4 years ago, Sarah and Chloe permanently left South Carolina. When I last heard, they were renting a trailer under different last names someplace in Georgia. I never looked for them, they never looked for me. The quiet is pure. It's the end. There is peace. I get asked if I'm upset. I'm not. Anger consumes energy, which I have chosen to use for living. Some people inquire about my forgiveness. I don't have the right to forgive. They have the right to earn it, but they never have. I'm just finished. I do have such a profound sense of thankfulness that it still surprises me. Thank you to the man who spent 20 nights sleeping in a vinyl chair. For the retired chief who never skipped a counseling session. For the grandfather who made his heart a harbor and his house a home. Those who are your blood relatives are not your family. Family is the one who stays with you when your blood runs cold on an operating table. Family members are the ones that hold your hand, sign documents, and never once make you feel like a burden. If you're watching this and feeling afraid, feeling like you don't have that person, please try harder. They exist. They can occasionally be the unexpected grandparent you need. They can be the neighbor who won't go, the friend, or the teacher, and hang on when you find them. Therefore, true families are not created. It is selected each and every day, particularly on the days when it costs them everything to choose you. That is the only certain truth I am aware of. What about you? Have you ever had someone unexpected step up for you when you needed it most? Or perhaps you've been that person for someone else. Share your stories in the comments below. I'm reading every single one.